Hello and welcome to Crit's Ringside Chat, your eyes, ears, and voice for pro wrestling and NYC, and your one-stop shop for an honest critique from an honest fan. And today, we've got a lot to talk about because we're going to go over the events of WWE's Elimination Chamber 2025 in Toronto with too many things to go over, so we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. We're going to do this a little bit differently than what we've done for the past couple of pay-per-view coverages, where instead of going from match to match to match, we're just going to go over the whole thing and talk about the high points. I'll give my brief opinions on the matches at hand before we go into the high points, the low points, and everything in between. The Women's Elimination Chamber match, very good match, very great showing for Roxanne Perez, hell of an opening. We'll get more into that later, but one hell of an opening. And thank God that this match showed everybody that Liv Morgan was beating the washed allegations. I've seen people give Liv Morgan hate for one reason or another, the she can't wrestle allegations, all that nonsense, when really the only reason people ever thought that is because she was stuck in a bad feud involving the Judgment Day and Rhea Ripley. Once she escaped that feud, she was finally able to show everybody that yes, she knows ball and she is one of the best women's wrestlers out there right now. Also, wholeheartedly agree with the winner. Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley is actually relatively fresh, all things considered. These women haven't wrestled one-on-one in like 4 years. So while it seems like it's not that fresh on paper, it's actually really, really new. Tiffany Stratton and Trish Stratus versus Candice LeRae and Nia Jax. I hate to say it, but honestly, it feels like a filler match. Like it was there to give Trish Stratus something to do and to get a hometown pop. It felt like a match where Hunter saw people online talking about how much he didn't want to book the women, and so he threw it together just to get people to stop saying that. The story wasn't really all there. There was no real reason for Nia to continue to feud with Tiffany. She won pretty handedly against Nia on more than one occasion. Same goes for Candice LeRae. So we really should be taking this time to develop her feud with Charlotte more, rather than continuing this thing with Nia. But honestly, it was better than I thought it would have been. A much better match than the build made it out to be. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in an unsanctioned match. Holy crap. I previously said in another episode that Drew McIntyre and CM Punk were about as extreme as WWE can get when it comes to violent matches. I'm putting big quotes on the word violent here. But honestly, that match at this point feels like a diamond in the rough, an outlier. This is the match that shows how violent WWE can be within the parameters of PG. No blood, no thumbtacks, no burning tables, none of that. A little bit of barbed wire, not real barbed wire per se, but still barbed wire nonetheless. But lots of tables, lots of chairs, lots of invented and crazy spots with the chairs. And really, really good selling on Sami Zayn's part to sell the violence of the match. When you're not allowed to go crazy with the toys you're allowed to play with in death matches or anything like that, this is what you do in order to sell violence in a PG setting. The Men's Elimination Chamber match. Woo! First off, fuck Logan Paul. Always fuck Logan Paul. Not physically, but emotionally. Drew. It's hard to feel sorry for Drew because in kayfabe, he does this to himself a lot. He does this to himself. Like between his obsession with CM Punk or his obsession with other characters, he really does this shit. Like there's nobody to blame but himself when it comes to these scenarios. In this scenario, I guess it's a little bit less for him to blame, but in general, Drew has been his own worst enemy for the longest time. Damian Priest, my boy, thank God he got that showing. Fuck Logan Paul for giving him the pin. And once Logan Paul is out, we got to our real stars of the show, Seth, Cena, and Punk. And this is where the match got kicked up a notch. This is where the match went crazy. And good lordy Lou, the ending. Again, we're going to get to this. But now that we went over our matches, we went over how we feel about our matches, let's talk about the highlights and the lowlights, the actual show. First off, Pat McAfee, suck my dick, for an hour straight, bitching and moaning and complaining about the fact that Canada refused to cheer for the American National Anthem. I wonder why they wouldn't want to do that. Now, before anybody says, oh, you're getting too political up in here, bitch, I don't care. I'm stating my opinion. Fuck Pat McAfee. He should have let that shit go. There was no need to harp on this, especially since, hello, you've got a show to commentate on, my guy. Moving on. Jade Cargill. Now, Jade Cargill showing up wasn't really a surprise to anybody. I think all of us expected Jade to show up at some point during this show because, let's be honest, the story between her, Naomi, and Bianca was starting to slow down with her lack of presence. So we needed something to push that story going into WrestleMania. And she did it in a big, big way. I expected her to show up after the match was over. What I did not expect was for her to go in, guns blazing, whoop the piss out of Naomi, and get her out of the match without her even getting to do anything. Do I feel a little bit of a type of way that Naomi didn't even get to participate in the match before this happened? A little bit. At first, it feels like it's shafting Naomi because, let's be honest, this is not the first time Naomi has been shafted. But if you think about it in service of the story, I'm down for it. Especially if they're going to follow through with a Naomi heel turn. If they follow through with this heel turn, then this has the gumption, this has the sauce to be a generational women's story for WrestleMania. One of the only women's matches in WrestleMania that could be one-on-one that doesn't involve a title, which is that shit that we need. It sounds super specific, but I really want you to think back to how many women's matches that have been one-on-one at WrestleMania that don't involve the championship. Whichever ones you can think of, they were probably really pathetic because they came from Vince of all people. Hell of an entrance from Jade Cargill. I am ready for this story. Randy Orton. Randy Orton showing up, I think, was the least surprising thing that happened out of this pay-per-view. We all expected Randy Orton to return eventually because we've all seen the reports that Randy versus Kevin is going to be the story going into WrestleMania 41. And even if we didn't see the reports, we could assume that eventually Randy was going to come back to get his licks in on Kevin. And that is exactly what he did. We almost saw the return of the punt even before they bitched out and stopped him from doing it, which resulted in every security guard in the fucking building getting an RKO for their troubles. I've seen people say that Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens had the makings of a WrestleMania match. In fact, there was a WrestleMania match a few years back, and while I definitely agree on this, do not get me wrong, friends, I am with you on this. I personally think that this match, this version of this match in particular, needed to happen in front of their fellow countrymen. Toronto was the key element that took this match from being another really good Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens match to a generational one. And finally, our last of the surprises. Do I know why Travis Scott is hanging out with The Rock outside of the fact that Travis Scott is performing this year's WrestleMania theme song? I don't know. Is he going to wrestle? God, I hope so. But this isn't about Travis Scott. And honestly, this isn't even about The Rock. It's kind of about The Rock, but it's not really about The Rock. What this is about is John Cena doing the thing that we have been asking him to do for the past maybe 12 years. The thing that he's only done in stuff like Peacemaker or Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where he's played the bad guy. John Cena has finally turned heel. And it's one of those things where once you look back on it, it really starts to make sense. And not in a way of like, oh, we're just filling in the gaps to make things make sense because the stuff at the time didn't make sense. Like Dwayne Johnson appearing at Bad Blood and people trying to make sense of the hand symbol that he made at the time. No, the fact that Cena was able to just throw himself into the Elimination Chamber even though everyone else had to qualify, the utter lack of hesitation on his part in performing the STF on Punk after Seth stomped his ass, man, words escape me. Words just completely escape me. What else can be said that a million other people haven't already said? This is something that we've wanted for the longest time. They've whooped the piss out of Cody Rhodes. John Cena's turned corporate. Shit, this is Hulk Hogan joining the NWO levels. What else can be? I keep repeating myself, but really, what else can be said? What I can say is this. Dwayne Johnson is spectacular at using other people's moments to make himself look competent. For example, last year when Cody won the Royal Rumble and challenged Roman Reigns, and Rocky decided to attempt to steal his moment. The fact that they backpedaled so quickly, and then afterwards Rocky wanted to pat himself on the back and act like this was his plan all along in order to make himself look better and make Cody Rhodes look like the bigger star than he already was. Even though, let's be honest, everything about Cody's star power was all due to Cody. The same nonsense is happening here. The big thing everybody's talking about is John Cena going corporate, John Cena turning heel, John Cena is joining The Rock. The Rock is secondary in this moment, despite him being the instigator for this turn. He is capitalizing off of this moment the only way he knows how, acting like he really did something when all he really did was stand there and make the signal. It's all about Cena. The Rock is just doing what he does best, being a leech. There's one last thing I want to talk about before we wrap things up, and that is the structure of these modern WWE pay-per-views. Do I appreciate these smaller cards where there's like 4, 5, 6 matches in a pay-per-view? Absolutely. Vince would pack these shits with like 6, 7, even 8 matches, even on a B-level pay-per-view. And that's not to say that Elimination Chamber is a B-level pay-per-view. It is the last pay-per-view before WrestleMania. But at the same time, he would take pay-per-views like, I don't know, Great Balls of Fire, Stomping Grounds, all the other ones with the stupid names that I don't remember off the top of my head. He would fill them with these matches and cause them to go on way longer than they needed to be. Under Triple H's reign, these pay-per-views have gone down to NXT TakeOver size cards. 4, 5, 6, moderate to really good matches per card. The issue of it now is, these matches don't last that long. I mean, this one had matches that lasted long. The Rumble had matches that lasted long. But your typical pay-per-views like Money in the Bank, Extreme Rules, stuff like that, those matches don't really run for anything more than, we'll say, like 20, 25 minutes if a match is high enough on the card. Maybe even a half an hour. But that would be one match on the card as opposed to 2 or 3. So typically 4, 5, or 6 matches, each one going from, let's say, 11 minutes to 25 minutes on average. We're going to use Eastern Standard Time for this example. Let's say you start at 7 or 8 o'clock and then you end things off at 10:30 or 11 o'clock. That's maybe 3 or 4 hours for a show. And for 4 matches, on average maybe 10 to 25 minutes each with one 30-minute outlier, that averages out to maybe like an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 45 minutes if we're really being generous, of professional wrestling. The rest of that is ads. And don't even get me started on certain pay-per-views that just have segments on the card. Like that one Backlash, I think it was, where they had the Grayson Waller effect with Cody Rhodes. Or that one Money in the Bank where John Cena tried to hint at a WrestleMania in London. It's just eating time that could have been used to put more matches on the show. And this is just from a viewing perspective of just us sitting here at home watching on TV. Can you imagine the viewing public and the audience who pays God knows how much money on their tickets, plus stupid ass Ticketmaster fees, to go in and get maybe an hour and 45 minutes of wrestling on a wrestling pay-per-view? Like, I full-heartedly acknowledge that WWE is more focused on moments and storylines as opposed to professional wrestling. I get that. I understand that. The problem is that you need to give the audience more of what they paid for. They're not paying just to see Roman, Seth, Becky, Rhea, whoever just stand around. They want to see these people compete, especially on pay-per-view. You can get away with that on TV because not only are TV prices much lower comparatively, but for a guaranteed maybe 3-hour show on Raw or SmackDown or whatever, you can eat up time by having promos and whatnot. Plus, not to mention, you have dark matches happening before and after the show, so at least the audience gets to see a couple of wrestlers actually compete, in addition to the promos and whatever happens on TV. But when it comes to pay-per-views, with a lack of pre-show matches, which went away for no real reason, you're left with so few matches to enjoy on a pay-per-view card. And no matter how good those matches may be on a pay-per-view card, the fact that there are so little of them almost makes you feel like you're being ripped off. Maybe that's good enough for certain members of audiences, mothers and fathers taking their kids out to see pro wrestling because, hey, look, we're going to go see John Cena. We're going to go see Roman Reigns. We're going to go see Seth Rollins. We're going to go see Rhea Ripley. That may be enough for them. I can only speak for myself and maybe a few of my mutuals, but we want our money's worth. So the Elimination Chamber, a fantastic, crazy-ass pay-per-view full of tons and tons of moments that we needed to get us excited on the road to WrestleMania after the build so far has been really lackluster, but also a show that has its issues and is evident in its issues. Not issues with the show itself, mind you, not with this particular show, but issues with WWE as a whole and Hunter's presentation and booking as a whole. I could get into so much more in regards to Hunter's booking, but that's another episode for another time. All in all, amazing, amazing show. I cannot wait to see what goes on with Jade Cargill and John Cena. Until then, whether it's on your screen in NYC or a travel necessity, we will be seated. My name is Crit. Thank you for joining me at ringside.